That is being recorded. Right. Okay. So I'm just going
to... Yeah, recording button is on. I can see it says recording.
Great. So it's a Thursday, and good for being a Jupiter day, generally speaking, for learning something or teaching something. So today we are talking about the astrological house systems, and I don't know if any of you watched the video that I had up on the event page, but the impetus for this is to inform astrologers and people who are getting into astrology at whatever level you are at. If you read traditional material, if you understand, know, or familiar with the history of astrology, the other word used for an astrologer was mathematicus, because they had to actually manually calculate the charts that they were using. Obviously, they didn't have solar fire to just click away. There you go. So it's important. And when I was studying astrology, that's one of the first things we did, was that we constructed manually with calculations, at least a very basic version of calculations, the houses, and also using the astrolabe, which is an important thing. I have an astrolabe on my desk, or my tray table as it goes, but it's important to understand the traditional point of view, because it's the mathematics, which is the language of nature. So I'm hearing a lot of background noise from someone crumpling paper.
I think that's me. I'm trying to eat a biscuit. Should I mute myself, Theo, from this side?
If you're eating, that's probably a good thing. Maybe once you're done, since we're done chewing.
Sorry, it's just cold and rainy. I need a biscuit with my tea. Right. Sorry, let me quickly. If I mute myself, can I still hear you? Let me try this.
Yes, you can. When you're done, just come back on. It's fine. It is the evening time, dinner time, so I understand if you need to shower, but you're going to need the energy anyway. So, yes, okay. So from that point of view, where was I? Understanding the concepts behind the different house systems, because people have applied their minds to try and figure out what is the best way to do this. And in Vedic astrology, there's a whole different reasoning behind the house systems, because the zodiac is placed in a very different place in space. And here we're just talking about the tropical zodiac and the tropical system of astrology, where the zodiac is much closer to the Earth. All right, it's not on the stars; it's actually around the Earth. So, following the sun's path. So let's get into it. What I'm going to talk about in this video is these four things. We're going to cover the celestial geometry and mechanics, just so you understand visually what's going on. So when I start then, constructing the various house systems for you, hopefully following along with me hand in hand. So the first two bullet points, they are building up this process of you understanding where each house system is coming from. And from that point of view, we'll go into the history of the house systems, and that's just one slide, so don't worry. Okay, it's nothing, there's no dates being thrown at you as such. And then we're going to go into application, and all of my webinars are very application focused. Everything I do in astrology is application focused. So I think I've got 5 examples, very interesting examples that are going to be useful. They're also teaching you something, maybe teaching you new techniques in astrology you may not have heard of before. But it's also showing you how to work whole signs, which is really not a house system, with a house system, and what that can do for you, and what each house system may be telling you, or what is the approach there. Because the houses essentially are areas of life, and so each person has a conceptualization behind how each system is being constructed, which speaks to, well, what part of that area of life do I want to maybe focus on here or look at. Okay, so we're going to go into all of that. Do you have any questions before we get going?
Not yet.
Okay. If you do, please also just put up in the chat, or you can just, unmute yourself and just voice the question. And if it's something that I'll answer at the end, then I'll just come back to it. So the first part is obviously the celestial geometry and mechanics. And am I speaking too fast for you? Is this okay? Okay, it seems to be all right. So, cool. So these are the things we're going to talk about in this geometry section, which is the 5 great circles, the 2 types of directions, the 2 types of motion, and the 2 types of time arcs. The astrological chart is constructed out of these things, and every astrological technique you're ever going to use is sort of rooted in these four fundamental building blocks of the mechanics of it. So the first thing we're going to talk about, oh yes, I want to show you this video because I want you to get a sense of what we're trying to do here, because this is what people saw when they started looking at the sky. And I just want, you're only seeing the stars. The zodiac is not there, okay? The zodiac is some imposition onto the space that we're looking at. And you can see the movement here. It's kind of going down and also kind of going to the right at the same time. Okay, so these are the 2 motions that we're going to be investigating and talking about. So if you follow one star, you'll notice that sort of motion that is going here, it's going up and also to the right at the same time. So what we're looking at is how to divide this to delineate the various areas of life, because this is the starting point of all astrology, of what you're looking at right now. So if you ever get a chance to, think about the house systems and think about your chart in terms of space or in terms of time, because those are the 2 archetypes we're working with here, which mathematically we are trying to, get a grips on and put onto a 2D piece of paper. So I'm just going to end that. Okay, so the first thing is the 5 great circles. So a great circle, by definition, is any circle in a sphere that divides that sphere exactly in half. Okay, and the 5 that we are using in astrology is the celestial horizon, the celestial equator, the meridian, the prime vertical, and the ecliptic. So these are the 5 great circles we're going to discuss. So let's start with the first one, the celestial horizon. So, from first principles is just you standing on the surface of the earth, looking at the sky. So that's the first great circle we talk about. So here we're talking about the terrestrial horizon, okay, which is the limit of your vision in terms of space in the 4 directions, the 8 directions, okay. The horizon line separates what is seen from what is not seen. I think that's, self-explanatory. Everything below you, you cannot see. Everything above the horizon, you can potentially see. Okay, if there were no mountains in your way, etc. Okay, but it is the limit of your spatial perception. So, and it's, along the horizon plane, the measurement is called azimuth, and above or below it is called altitude. So I think everybody understands that. Everyone that has done orienteering and these kind of things are familiar with the geographical aspects of the terrestrial horizon. And the point directly above you on the horizon is called the zenith, and the point directly below you on the horizon is called the nadir. All these terms are going to be used later on. So remember, this is you standing on the surface of the earth. Okay. So the celestial horizon, so there we see you standing on the surface of the earth somewhere. The zenith is above you, the nadir is somewhere below you. Okay. This is the local horizon, or the terrestrial horizon, or the topocentric horizon. Okay. That small little piece of the earth that you can see. All right. Then but compared to the distance between the earth and the planets and the stars, the difference between the center of the earth, the horizon projected at the center of the earth to where you are on the surface of the earth is fairly negligible when we're talking about the distance of light years, okay? So for the purpose of astrology, we are going to be using what we call the geocentric horizon, which is nothing more than just your local horizon, but drawn at the center of the earth, going to the center of the earth. Okay, it is not the same as the equator. Please understand that. Okay, because most astrology diagrams, when they're explaining this, I found they are showing everybody standing upright. So people then kind of conflate the geocentric horizon with the Earth's equator. And it's not the same thing, okay? That is to do with the equatorial system. This is the celestial horizon. Is that clear? Just looking at the chat. Okay, cool. Right. So now we're moving one step further out from the Earth. So the boundary, the black boundary here, this sphere or this celestial circle, sphere is the planet Earth, okay, the surface of the Earth. Now we're taking this whole Earth and we're putting it as a point. Here, this is the Earth now in the middle here. And we're extending the geocentric horizon out into space, okay? Now it is called, once that geocentric horizon expands to touch the celestial sphere somewhere out in space, it is now called the celestial horizon. Okay, so you understand that, we went from where you are standing on the Earth, on the surface of the planet, or surface of the Earth, move that horizon to the center of the Earth, move that out of the Earth into space, and that is called the celestial horizon. Okay. So obviously this is dependent on where you are on the surface of the Earth. Right. Now, what hasn't changed? The directions haven't changed, and the zenith and nadir haven't changed. Okay. And this is going to provide us a platform for constructing the chart as a reference frame. So really the celestial horizon is doing what? It is setting the reference frame as a great circle that symbolizes your vision of what you can see and what you cannot see. That is the purpose of this great circle, all right? And in the chart, where is it? So in the chart, it is, it's depicted by the ascendant-descendant axis, okay? Roughly, okay, we just go with it. It's roughly the ascendant-descendant axis, okay? Actually, it is the ascendant-descendant axis. Some of you who use the eastern point and the vertex and things like that, that is showing the true east direction, which is not the same as the ascendant direction. And I'll show that visually, why the ascendant is not due east necessarily, okay? But the horizon line is the ascendant-descendant axis in the chart. And it's important because it shows us, in this area of the chart, i.e. in this area of your horizon, okay, looking out somewhere in the east, okay, things are rising, planets and stars are rising every day. And if you look out to the west, that's where they're setting, somewhere in the west, okay? The next great circle is the prime vertical, and this great circle divides the celestial horizon into northern and southern halves. So it passes due east, right? It passes, let me get my pointer so it's maybe a bit easier to see. Okay, so it passes due east, and due west. Why? Who's laughing? Okay, so it's separate. It's a great circle. It's dividing the sphere into north and half. Okay, it's pretty straightforward there. And where is that in the chart? It's also somewhere along this ascendant-descendant axis, but the prime vertical passes due east and due north, wherever that is. Okay. So it's not always aligned to the ascendant-descendant axis, but it is basically, it's cutting through the chart this way. It's coming up towards you through the screen. Can you visualize that? That's where the prime vertical is. You don't actually see it in the chart, but it is there, okay? It's implicit. If you're using the eastern point and vertex and things like that, then you will see it more clearly, because the eastern point will be the intersection of due east to the ecliptic. Cool. We're on track. All right. Then the next one is the meridian. okay, or the prime meridian, depending who you talk to. This is doing the same thing, it's just dividing it into an east and a western half, okay? So this is passing through the southern due south, and it's passing through due north, and bisecting the horizon in that way, the celestial horizon. And in the chart, it does correspond to the MCIC axis. All right. Why? It only does this because the definition of the ecliptic, which is what we are plotting here on the outside with the zodiac signs, it intersects the meridian at the midheaven. That is the definition of the midheaven. So that is showing due north as the midheaven if you're in the southern hemisphere, and it's showing due south at the midheaven if you're in the northern hemisphere, because it is intersecting the prime meridian, which passes through due south and due north. Okay? So, and that is how the directions are involved, incorporated in the chart, and the horizon. Although bear in mind the due east and due west axis is not always shown. So what's going on with the ecliptic? Because that's the next great circle. That's the one we care about, right? So, okay, here you've got the horizon, okay, and somewhere in the east, the sun will be rising, okay? It rises, it gets up, it coincides with the meridian, the prime meridian, that's its maximum altitude, okay, from the horizon during the day, and then it goes down, and sets at the descendant somewhere in the west. The ascendant only is due east at the equinoxes. Okay. And the shifting of the sun rise somewhere along the horizon here in azimuth is a seasonal factor. It's a seasonal thing. Okay. Right. So the places of power then were defined because the sun, who is the individual soul, is the light of the world and the energy source of the world, is connecting to the horizon, which is where you're standing. It is the division of what you can see and what you cannot see, as well as coinciding with the north and the southernmost points on the meridian. So this is why the angles in the chart are places of power, because they are showing the connection of the light of the sun, okay, which is consciousness and all of that, with a material distinction of the directions. We're not using due east and due west because the sun is not coinciding with those points. That is why we don't draw the eastern point and vertex in the chart. We care about where the sun is coinciding with the horizon, because that's what I'm standing on, and that is my reference frame, as well as above and below me, where is the sun connecting to north and south, all right? Do you understand? This is why the angles have this kind of power signification to them. And that's why we care about the angles in the chart, you know. So if you're using whole signs, you're saying, well, I don't care about this connection of the sun to where I'm standing on. And, you know, you can make a call about that. But this is what the point of this lecture is to make you think about, when you're saying I'm only using whole sign houses, what you're actually doing, okay? And there's a reason for using whole signs that you're going to go into, but I would like people to be more aware about the why, okay? We are choosing these things, not just because somebody said so. So the angles in the chart as points on the ecliptic, okay, because it is the sun's path, okay, are showing this is where the northernmost point in space is of my spatial perception is connecting to the ecliptic. This is where the southern extreme is. This is where the eastern connection on the horizon is with the sun. So this is why they are important points, okay? Because the sun's light is basically filtering into material manifestation through these 4 points. And from this, you have all the mythologies, you know, the rising sun, the midday sun as a hero, conquering the setting sun, the hero dying, you know, facing a challenge, going to the underworld, and being rejuvenated in the southernmost point, which is the midnight sun. Okay, all of this plays into mythologies very, very, you know, everywhere, very nicely. So again, with the ecliptic, let's talk about this because this is important. Along the ecliptic, the measurement, okay, this is following the order of the signs, all right? This is called celestial longitude. And above and below the ecliptic is called celestial latitude, all right? Only the sun is always on the ecliptic, obviously, because that's how the ecliptic is defined. The apparent motion of the sun around the earth. All the other planets are above or below the ecliptic, all right? Now, astrologers call that declination, how above or below the ecliptic a celestial body is. But the more technical term for it is celestial latitude, because there's a confusion with declination used in various ways as a term to define things, okay? So to be more correct, when astrologers talk about declination, and that is also, I think, in some ephemerides where it is given, we're calling it declination, but keep in mind that it is declination above and below the ecliptic, which is celestial latitude, okay? We should, you know, be very clear on our terms here as astrologers. And then the last great circle is obviously the equator itself, which is, you know, splitting, you know, following the split of north and south of the Earth, okay, into hemispheres. And that is obviously projected out into space and called the celestial equator, right? Again, it is not the horizon. Remember, the horizon was going this way, okay, for someone standing over there, which is what we're going to describe now. Is everyone kind of with me here? We're now talking about the celestial equator. This is the Earth spinning on its axis. Okay? Cool. So, a measure of distance along the celestial equator, okay, you know, is called right ascension. Where on this pink circle are we relative to the center of the Earth? And above or below it is called declination. And you see where it gets confusing. Astronomically, we're talking, this is called declination, right? And it is normally called latitude. Okay, it is the same thing. So I just want you to be clear that when astrologers talk about declination, you need to be very clear they're talking about declination in terms of latitude relative to the celestial equator, or are they talking about declination in terms of above or below, you know, celestial latitude in terms of above or below the ecliptic? Because people get into all sorts of arguments when actually it's just a definition, you know, thing. There was a question here. Let me just check in the chat. Come on. Is right ascension the same as longitude? No. So right ascension is, yeah, you can say it's like longitude, but it's not giving you a sense of, let me think about that. Should I say that? Have I seen that being used? Yeah, I suppose it is. You can say it's a short form of saying longitude. But again, you know, then we have to be very clear. Are we talking about celestial latitude and longitude? Okay. Are we talking about equatorial latitude and longitude? And that's the difference, okay? So just keep that in mind. It is longitude, I suppose, because it is a measure of how above or below from the equator something is on the surface of the Earth. Okay, so so primary directions. Now, obviously, this is following the direction of the spin of the Earth. You know, the Earth is rotating around the North Star or the North Pole in this manner. Okay, each of these circles, you imagine it's just spinning around and around and around. Now, if you are looking at the stars, you are at this point. Okay, you are standing on this point of the Earth, on the surface, and during the course of a day the Earth is going to rotate around. Okay, so what is happening is that you are actually moving like this on the surface of the Earth in the course of one day. if you are at this latitude. Okay? And that means how you are seeing all the stars and everything in the sky in the course of a day is also rotating in the same direction. Because you are looking out into space. Now this motion, this is called primary motion. It is showing the rising and the setting of planetary bodies and stars and everything like that due to the rotation of the Earth. Okay, that is called primary motion, and it is the foundation for primary directions. Okay, in the primary direction, okay, 1 degree of right ascension that passes over the meridian via primary motion is equated to 1 year of life. That is the definition of primary directions. It's separate from secondary directions such as progressions and things which people are familiar with, or solar arcs. Primary directions is it's the main form of a prediction that was used in traditional astrology, but it's very difficult to calculate. Okay, it's a very hairy calculation, especially if you're going away from the angles, the cardinal places. Okay, but I want you to understand this is primary direction, which is the rising and setting of stars and celestial bodies, which is following and is due to the rotation of the Earth on its axis. And it is in the equatorial system. All right. Now, any questions about the 5 great circles? Okay, remember it's the celestial horizon, the prime meridian, prime vertical, the celestial equator, and the ecliptic. Let me just see. No, okay, cool. I'm going to move on. Right. So let's talk about the equatorial system a little bit more. So the sun, whose motion is tracked by the ecliptic, okay, the yellow line, okay, and this is like, this is how you see the Milky Way in the sky is not completely straight, it's not exactly coincident with the angle of declination that you're at, closer to the horizon, which is what we'll talk about now. All of these bodies rise and set according to primary motion. Okay, so even though the sun zodiacally is moving like this around the Earth, okay, in one day it is moving like that, parallel to the black circles. Do you understand? Because it is rising and setting. I'll show you this a little bit more visually when we come to it. So both these motions are happening together. The movement along the zodiac called secondary motion, all right, which is independent of the Earth's rotation, okay, and the primary motion, which is because of the Earth's rotation in a day. The secondary motion is due to the the Earth going around the sun in a year, okay, and the primary motion is due to the Earth rotating, so-called around the sun in a year, okay. The sun is moving around the Earth in one day. So these are the two motions. And so that is how you get the day equals a year thing, which is the basis for secondary progressions. This is where it comes from. A joining of these two motions is what secondary progressions is showing you. So let's go in some detail. If you're standing at the North Pole, okay, this is the horizon line. This is going to be the horizon line, okay? The sun is not going to appear to rise or set because it's coincident with the horizon, because it's parallel to the equator, okay? And the sun is rising and setting like this. So where you are in the North Pole or the South Pole, it's rising and setting, it may not be perceptible. Maybe for that's why they have 6 months of summer and 6 months of winter, okay? If you are somewhere in Norway, 60 degrees latitude, okay, this is the horizon plane. You're standing on the horizon up here, 60 degrees north of the equator, okay? Everything is rising and setting as per this yellow circle, okay? So the angle this is going to be the angle to your horizon that you see all the stars and things rise and set every day. If you now are somewhere in London, which is 50 degrees latitude, it's a bit, this angle is less now. So you will see longer summers, shorter winters, these kind of things happening, okay? And if you're, maybe in Egypt, 32 degrees north of the equator, the angle is even larger, okay? And if you're at the equator, okay, well then everything is rising and setting perpendicular to the horizon. Okay, so do you see how that works? Right, how things are rising and setting relative to where you are on the horizon. Okay, cool. Then, now let's talk about the other two motions, which are in Mundo and in Zodiaco. So we know that the ecliptic is the path of the sun, apparent path of the sun around the earth. And planets and other celestial bodies are either above or below it, okay? So let's take a snapshot of this one celestial body here, right, below the ecliptic, and let's have a look at it a little bit more detail. So here it is here, okay? This was the celestial horizon, and let's say, this is its position in the sky, actually where it is. That's called in Mundo, okay? And primary directions use the in Mundo positions of planets. There are people that also use the in Zodiaco position, but it's not primary motion. It's not really primary direction anymore. So the projection of that actual position onto the ecliptic is obviously its position in the zodiac. Okay. Now this is, and so everything you're doing in secondary motion, secondary progressions, you are moving this position. You're not moving the actual planet. You're moving the projection of that planetary archetype onto the light path of the sun, and that is what you're moving along the zodiac. Whereas in Mundo, you're moving the actual position of the planet. Okay, so what's different here? It's different in terms of timing. It makes a difference in prediction, because the in Zodiacal position, let's say this is the eastern horizon, okay? It is going to rise at this time. The planets in Zodiacal position on the ecliptic is going to rise at that time. But the planet is actually rising later. The planet is actually hitting the eastern horizon later. It actually becomes visible much later in the sky. So when you are saying that a planet in the zodiac, you can say Jupiter is rising, it's hitting the ascendant. Jupiter is not rising. It may not be. You may be saying that Jupiter's projection onto the zodiac is rising. So it's important to make that distinction. And in prediction, this is a kind of event, okay, but this is also a kind of event. So if you are doing rectification, which timing is Jupiter rising? Or Pluto hitting the ascendant as a transit? Which one are you looking at? You need to be very clear, as an astrologer, if you're doing rectification, what exactly you're looking at, okay? Because both these events will happen. This event might happen 2 years later, okay, by primary motion, and you might think it's Saturn on the midheaven transit. Well, it may not be that, okay? So there's a whole nother source of transits that are happening or directions that are happening that you need to take into account when you're doing things like rectification, for example, okay? There's a question or comment. Yeah, okay. Oh wait, was it a question? Right. Yes, sure. Yeah, no. I mean, this is why I got into rectification, because I wanted to make this distinction and see it happening. But so be careful when you're doing transits and things, what exactly are you looking at? Right. So, and that's also why, sometimes you may say, oh, well, Pluto hit the ascendant, but they're only having the Pluto effect in the event in their life a year or two later. And you think, well, okay, the birth time is off. No, the birth time is fine. It's the primary direction that gave the event rather than the zodiacal direction. And you need to learn to figure out which one is more relevant for a person, okay? So when people do rectification, they do all sorts of wonderful things, but you got to be very careful. Anyway, so primary and secondary motion, let's look at that. So that same point, right? Each day is moving forward in the zodiac. You see on the yellow, it's moving from this position to that position to that position to the next position. It's moving this way along the zodiac. That is the secondary motion each day. But each day it's also moving up this way. It's rising and then it's going down. It's setting in the west. Then it's rising and it's setting each day. So each day it's also moving up and down this way. So the net, when you look at the stars in the sky, they will look like they have this dual motion, okay? And the net motion will look like something kind of strange like that, it's going sort of both ways at the same time. And that's kind of, what we're looking at when you look at stars in the sky, time-lapse videos and things like that. You're looking at these two things happening at the same time, okay? Everyone with me?
Yeah, so.
Cool, right. So like that, each day, if you imagine the sun being stuck as a raisin in a bun of the sky, according to secondary motion, it's moving, it's at 5 degrees Aries the next day, it's at 6 degrees Aries, 7 degrees Aries, 8 degrees Aries, whatever, along the zodiac. But each day it's also setting, okay? It's moving down and up at the same time every day, okay? So the angle between these two motions is the angle of the Earth's inclination anyway, but it's also dependent on latitude. So, okay. So again, just to show you, just to look at it, right? You can see if you pay attention to one star, right? You can see it's moving up and it's moving to the right. Okay. So this is how we're looking at the two motions that are happening. Okay. Everyone got it? That's what you're looking at in the sky. Right. So primary motion, just to reiterate, is following the perceived motion of celestial bodies as they rise, okay? They culminate, they set, okay? So during the course of a day, from the perspective of the Earth, because you're standing on the Earth looking at this motion, okay? So it goes opposite the zodiac signs because it's following the east, north, or south, east altitude, then maximum altitude, and then setting in the west somewhere. So primary motion is everything moving this way in the zodiac. Okay, it's not actually a zodiacal movement; it's a sky movement. Okay, and then you have secondary motion, which follows the perceived motion of those same things along the zodiac during the course of a year, from the perspective of the Earth, and that is following the zodiac. Okay, so primary motion is following the course during a day. Secondary motion is following that projection over the course of a year. Okay, so what does this all mean, right? So primary motion is following the Earth's rotation. It is the world meeting us, because the stars are moving relative to us. So it is circumstantial. It's much better for events. No problem. The secondary motion is following the zodiac. It is us meeting the world, and it is emergent. So if you're talking about a secondary progression, that is why you have to see it in relation to the natal. That is why. That is why a secondary progression doesn't have meaning if it is not linked to the natal, because it is emergent. Okay? It is along the zodiac. It is our view going outside. Remember, the zodiac isn't there in the sky. It's not saying, oh, here to here is Aries. All you're seeing is stars when you look at the sky. You are projecting the zodiac from your mind onto the heavens. Okay? So secondary motion is an emergent direction. So what type of events will secondary progression tell you? Will it give you the same kind of events as primary directions would? No. in terms of rectification, that's important, right? So primary directions are going to give you more the hard-hitting, okay, the world gave me this to deal with sort of thing. With a central motion may give you some kind of event, but you have a little bit more free will with that. You can sort of negotiate a little bit, okay? Based upon your view of it, your view of that event is determining the outcome more. Whereas if it is primary direction, your view of that event doesn't really matter. It is happening to you whether you like it or not, right? So these are the two motions, and these are the two, like, so what about it, okay? And we use them both in astrology. So then, okay, before we go into arcs, any questions about that? You understand, I've explained the great circles, I've explained the two kinds of motion and the two kinds of direction, right? Okay, cool. So the nocturnal and diurnal arcs, okay. So let's use the sun as an example. Every celestial body's primary motion, okay, rising and setting, is indicated by a circle that's describing that. And that circle, like we said, is parallel to the equator, whatever latitude you're at, okay? That is the circle that is showing the rising and setting of that star or that planet, okay? So these circles are called diurnal circles because it's daily motion, right? The diurnal motion of a planet or a star, okay, is shown by this circle, right? And they're always parallel to the equator. Got it? I think that's fairly simple, right? You can call it nocturnal. Some people call it nocturnal. I don't know why, but you'll find that written, I guess because they're thinking about, they want to further define it as the diurnal as only the arc above the horizon, and nocturnal as only the arc below the horizon. Okay, and that's a bit technical, but it's the daily arc of the planet or the star. Okay, rising and setting. That is the arc that we're talking about. Okay. So, and yeah, okay. So the half, below the horizon as a nocturnal arc is called a semi-arc, and the arc above the horizon is also called a semi-arc. Now, to make it easier, the whole thing is called a diurnal arc, technically, right? And the part above the horizon is called a diurnal semi-arc, because it's in the daytime. And the arc below the horizon is called a nocturnal semi-arc. All right, these are just technical terms. Right, and that's the geometry done, guys. So congratulations, nothing too hectic. So, right,
yeah.
but you have the recording, so you can go over it and look at it. But any questions about that? Right. Now the real fun begins. Okay, now we're putting it all together. So just keep an eye on the time here. Good. Yeah, the visual is very helpful because otherwise, now I was going to go through all of this. It's like when you read some of the Persian authors and they're giving you all these calculations and it's just a whole string of words. And you're like, okay, let's break this down a bit. But we have to know the astronomy because that is the root of the astrology. You see why the angles so important, because now you can understand why they are so important, okay? The AC, midheaven, all these things. What are they doing in astrology? Because astrology assigns meaning to the astronomical phenomena. So the house systems, this is just a breakdown of the ones we're going to discuss here, okay? So there's two categories, some that are quadrant, what we call quadrant, in that they are houses, okay? They rely on the four cardinal angles that we said, the places of power, okay? They are called quadrant house systems, and others that don't really use them or use all of them, okay? All right. Obviously, whole science is not a quadrant house system because it disregards the four places of power. It doesn't use them in the house in division of time or space. Okay, but we'll talk about whole science later. Right. So you have some house systems that divide the ecliptic only. Okay, so it places emphasis on the annual orbit of the Earth around the Sun and nothing else. All right. So whole signs, porphyry, equal houses. Okay. They don't involve space. They're not talking about time. The division of time. Well, it's kind of a division of time, as in the astrological seasons, I suppose, or months. But it's not really dividing space in any way. So it's you look when you're using these house systems, you're looking at yourself outside of space, outside of the earth, right? You're looking at yourself like before you were born and conditioned by space, born on this latitude at this geographical location. You're saying that has no meaning. I'm just going to say whatever zodiac sign it is, okay? But it has a different meaning to it, which we'll go into. Then you have, and these ecliptical systems are very important because you're talking about an archetypal essence, okay, which is very important and is very close to a person's heart and very intimate to somebody. That is why maybe whole signs people say always feels correct, because it will. Okay, the archetype of the signs is always going to be relevant. Okay, so but it doesn't mean it's the only truth. Okay. So the divisions of space, okay, all of these systems that we're going to talk about take one of the great circles, divide it into 12 in a certain way, and project it in different ways to the ecliptic. Okay. And now we're moving the emphasis to the primary motion setup. Here, the emphasis is secondary motion. You can appreciate that. Here, the emphasis is the division based on primary motion, okay? And then there are house systems that divide time into 12 segments, okay, of equal time, all right? So it's taking a diurnal semi-arc, one of the semi-arcs, dividing them into, 6 or 12, and then projecting that onto the ecliptic, okay? So here, yes, it is emphasis on time, which is a derivation of primary motion anyway, okay? But here, primary motion is used to define space into 12, whereas here, the primary motion is used to define time into 12 segments. So two different ways of looking at the same thing, I suppose, right? Everyone understand? Is everybody there? Just give me a ping, because I'm not sure with the internet connection. Don't want Mercury. Okay, cool. It went very quiet there. Okay, I wasn't sure because internet, this time of the year can do strange things. So that is the overview. So when you're looking at a house system, you need to choose, okay, I'm using equal signs here. Okay, equal house system is ecliptic focused. All right, it's not a primary motion thing. What does that mean? I'm using Regiomontanus. It's using primary motion to divide space. What does that mean? Okay, because how is it doing that, right? I'm using Placidus or Koch. Is taking the same primary motion, but using that to divide time into 12. What does that mean for the house I'm looking at? Okay, because each of these house cusps is telling you, well, that conceptualization is at this degree in that sign. Do you understand? So anyway, so let's look at the equal house system because we're halfway through. Okay. So this is splitting the ecliptic into 12 equal segments based on the degree of the ascendant, which is the rising point of the sun on the celestial horizon. It is emphasizing the degree of the ascendant in each sign. So it shows you where this person is sitting in each sign of the zodiac. Where is this person's body-mind connection in each sign of the zodiac? That is what this house system is showing you. You see, I don't want you to look at house systems as just dividing into 12. I want to look at house systems as well. It's showing me a particular degree in a sign that is carrying some meaning. All right? That house cusp in that sign is carrying the meaning or significance of the whole conceptualization behind the house system. So if you are Taurus rising, you 6 degrees Taurus rising, that is showing the body-mind connection of identity. Your 6 degrees in Sagittarius, which is your 8th sign, is going to show where your body-mind connection is most vulnerable in that sign. So directions to 6 degrees of Sagittarius may affect your mind, may affect your body. Okay? Very personally, because the ascendant point is a very personal point. Okay? Your equal house degree, so 6 degrees in Aquarius for a Taurus rising person, will show where am I at work? Where is my body-mind connection in my work, in my 10th house? Do you understand? So the equal house system is showing you where you are sitting in each of these signs, okay, as a body-mind connection. Right. Yeah, Laurel, it is. I mean, I just want people to think, think about what you're doing. It's not just, oh, which one is the right way to divide? No, no, no. When you understand how each one is constructed and you think about what that means, then you have meaning, okay? And then you can choose more selectively from an informed position, okay? So you can understand equal house system is important in medical astrology. And that's indeed true what I found in my practice. Because it is the body-mind connection in every sign. If you're saying from the medical astrology calculations that the sign of Aquarius generates ill health for a person, is dangerous for the physical well-being of a person, I want to know where the ascendant point is in that sign, because that is showing me the most vulnerable point in that whole sign from a body-mind connection point of view. And that's what I'm going to pay attention to in medical astrology, for example. Okay? But you can look at this in terms of depression and all those cycles as well. Okay? When the moon, moon goes over your 8th house degree, what would happen to your mind at that time of the month? Okay? Just pay attention to it. You'll be very clear what this is. It is a body-mind connection. Okay? Right. The next one is Porphyry. Okay, so Porphyry is taking, okay, so the sun rises here, it culminates there, it goes down, 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 it sets, okay, that should be on the horizon line, sorry, that's my mistake, and it's at the IC here. What Porphyry does is it takes this arc on the ecliptic from ascendant to midheaven and divides that into 3 equal parts, and that's those 3 houses and the opposite 3 houses. And it takes the arc from midheaven to the descendant and divides it into 3 equal parts. And that's the other 3, 6 houses. And that's how it describes the houses. My preference is not to use the word house. My preference is to use the word point, okay? Because these points are showing the place of emphasis. Like this point is the mountain peak in that whole sign. If that sign was a landscape, this cusp of the house is like a mountain peak in that sign. Okay, so it is the spatial / seasonal division of the primal zodiac archetype. So it shows an emphasis of your subjective reality, because that's what the zodiac archetype is, at least tropically. Okay, so in terms of, yes, equal house is your body-mind connection in that sign, but the Porphyry house calc is, well, what is the most, obvious thing in that sign to you? Where is it? Where do you recognize that sign in those 30 degrees? What is most recognizable to you? So maybe if your Porphyry house cusp in, Capricorn is towards the end of the sign and it's in a term of Saturn, and it is as that degree in Capricorn is aspected by Mars or something, well, your view about Capricorn is going to be like that. Your experience of Capricorn is strongly recognizable to you in that way. Whereas someone who has maybe their Porphyry house cusp Capricorn, conjunct Jupiter or aspected by Jupiter or Venus, their view of Capricorn may be slightly different. How Capricorn is recognizable to them is different. Okay? So how are you recognizing the archetypes in these areas of your life? That is what Porphyry, in the meanings of the house systems, as I'm showing you here, this is based upon just the work I've done. All right? You're not going to find it somewhere out there written in a book. It's my conceptualization that I'm sharing with you, okay? So take that with a grain of salt, the meanings, okay? But how it is constructed, that is for sure, fact, all right? Campanus, so forgive my artistic skills here. Drawing a circle is not easy, free form. But so the Campanus house system is taking, remember the prime vertical is dividing the celestial sphere into north and southern hemispheres because it goes through due east and due west. Okay, what it is doing is taking the prime vertical, this red circle, great circle, dividing that into 12 equal segments and projecting that onto the ecliptic. Okay, projecting it onto the ecliptic. You see, projecting it onto the ecliptic. So, north and southern, what is happening here? I mean, the division is north and south, which is an archetype of introvert, extrovert, because above the horizon you can see, below the horizon you can't see. Okay? So, you can look at it as an introvert, extrovert archetype. Now, I'm not really sure about that. That's an hypothesis that I have. I haven't really tested a lot of house systems using Campanus because you can appreciate testing all these degrees takes a lot of time. Okay, but that's kind of what I think about it so far. And, naturally, this is, remember, the prime vertical was the one great circle that isn't actually shown in the chart explicitly, because it is the due east, due west point, okay? It's not always coincident with the ascendant. So some people think, well, this is a way to incorporate all 5 great circles into the astrology chart. Let the prime vertical do something, okay? Let it divide space for us. So, if that floats your boat, then maybe Campanus may make you feel more secure that the astrology chart as a whole is inclusive of all the astronomical factors. Okay. Regiomontanus, right? Regiomontanus, okay. King on the mountain. Splits the equator into 12, right? It splits the equator into 12 parts, equal parts, and projects that to the ecliptic parallel to the North Pole, right? Well, the axis of the Earth. It is using the axis of the Earth, the rotational axis of the Earth, as the projection parallel. Do you see? Of all of those points onto the ecliptic. All right? Yeah, okay, cool. So there's nothing really, using the rotation of the Earth and the North, the North Star, if you want to call it, those are very fixed things. It's very, kind of rooted in the Earth, sort of the Earth's rotation kind of thing. So it's quite an objective sort of house system. Okay. So you can maybe say that, people say Regiomontanus is in horary because Lilly used it. And Robert Hand and other people are using whole signs for horary, and it works just fine. And I do too. I use them both. But when I'm looking at the Regiomontanus cusp, I'm showing this is the maximum objective material manifestation in that sign related to that house area of life. Okay. So maybe a Regiomontanus house cusp in the 5th house, maybe that describes my children physically. Maybe that term rolo aspect to that degree describes the more physical aspect of that area of life. But it's not describing my creativity as a fifth house thing. It's not describing my feelings of love and appreciation as a fifth house thing. Do you understand? The Regiomontanus house cusp is derived from a very material and objective construction. So that degree in that sign is carrying this very, it is what it is, sort of external material manifestation of that house, area of life. You understand what I'm saying? So essentially, my view is, yes, whole science is always correct. And each of the house systems as points in those signs are showing you different nuances of interpretation for the things of that house and the things of that sign. Okay, so Regiomontanus I'm not gonna use Regiomontanus for psychological investigation. I'm going to use Regiomontanus for things like accidents. Am I getting a promotion? Where's the money? Where's the lost watch? So things like horary are suited more to Regiomontanus. It makes sense. Okay, because it's usually about other people. It's usually about the house or the plumber or something. Okay, very sort of material manifestation sort of thing. So the Regiomontanus house cusps in each sign are going to show the mountain peak of material manifestation in that sign. Okay. Morinus, Morinus, I don't know, French guy. He's also choosing to use the equator, split it 12, but instead of projecting it based on the North Star, which is a very fixed thing, he is projecting it based on perpendicular to the ecliptic. Do you see the difference between the two? This is projecting the same pink divisions parallel to the North Star in the rotational axis of the Earth, which is consistent with the equatorial system. Okay. He said, well, I want to combine the material manifestation with the subjectivity of the zodiac projection. So he's now going back to the zodiac, projecting perpendicular to the zodiac. It's quite different, hey, right? So you can understand this system is sort of trying to do kind of both things at the same time. And I'm not really sure, I've got mixed sort of results testing these degrees. I suppose because it is meant to be very mixed, but that doesn't help me specify in prediction. Is it an external? Is this transit to this degree affecting something external? Is the transit to this degree affecting just your mind, something internal? You see, it's difficult to predict, I find, this way. But it's a compromise situation between the objective and subjective archetypes, okay? And the problem with it is that it doesn't honor the ascendant degree, which, I don't know, if you feel that, the point of the sun rising on the eastern horizon is very important to you, then this system, people get a bit uncomfortable because it unhinges the ascendant as the first house cusp. The ascendant becomes a floating point in the chart. So sometimes the ascendant can be in the second house. Okay, so what do you say about that? Don't know, but it's interesting to think about, right? And I would encourage people to think about it and to test these things further. Now we move it over to the time divisions. Okay, I have a question. Yes, it is a strange concept. Morinus was a kind of a rebellious person. At the time he was writing the Renaissance in France, he was basically saying everyone else doesn't know what they're doing. They've lost their way. This is, what seems to be a pattern in the world of astrology. But it is, he was one of those guys that really thought a lot about things, and I suppose he tried to find a in-between situation in terms of a house system. Yes, Patrick, the ascendant in the second house, the person can identify with money, but what about the ascendant ruler in the second house? How is it different? And what happens to the transits to the Morinus first house cusp versus the transits to the ascendant? How are you going to distinguish them? These things need to be researched and looked into, okay? And that's what I want people to do. But now you know. So now you know what you're doing. The Alcabitius house system. Okay, so now here it's a time thing. Okay, so just pay attention. We're taking the time that it takes the ascendant point, the degree of the ascendant, the time it takes that degree to get to the meridian, to become the midheaven. That amount of time we are splitting into 3 equal parts, and whatever degrees those correspond to become the house cusps. Let's say it again, right? The time it takes for the degree of the ascendant to become the midheaven, to reach its highest zenith, its highest altitude, sorry. That time is divided into 3, and we are then from that projecting the house cusps. All right? Right. So it's recognizing the ascendancy of the ascendant point. So what do you think that's telling you? Is the time journey of the ascendant. So it is like the time journey of you, how you identify as yourself. It's that journey through time that we are basing this house system on. So the Alcabitius house cusp in a sign, the degree in a sign, may tell you, well, when you are self-actualized, you identify in this way with this sign and the things of that sign. It's about self-actualization. It's a process of time, okay? The ascendant is rising, it's culminating. Do you understand the symbolism? So it's placing the emphasis on the ascendant point. Equal houses also place an emphasis on the ascendant point in each chart. But now we're not just saying it's a mind-body connection as a flat thing. We're saying it's a mind-body connection that is evolving over time in each sign. Okay? Then the Placidus. Now this is a bit crazy, okay? What this guy did, right? So see here we're taking the diurnal circle of the ascendant degree, okay? And finding when that culminates, dividing it into 3. Fine. What Placidus did, Placido did, he took the diurnal circle of every degree on the ecliptic. Okay, imagine each one of these black lines is a diurnal circle. Okay, he calculated that. And then he said, right, how to say, I'm trying to, what did I write here? It has cast at those points that have reached the 11 proportion semi-arcs, the time of the ascendant. Okay, so at the time of the ascendant, right, that degree diurnal arc that had reached 1/3 of its culmination becomes the degree of that house. At the time of the ascendant, that diurnal circle degree that had reached 2/3 of its ascension becomes the next house cusp. At the time of the ascendant, that diurnal circle that had reached its zenith, obviously is the midheaven, okay? Do you understand? It's a different way of looking at it. Okay. So it's treating all degrees. Yeah, it's quite similar, but before we're just using the diurnal arc of the ascendant. and then the time journey of that. Whereas here we're using the time of the ascendant and the diurnal arc of every other degree following it, right? So what it's doing is effectively it's taking all degrees rising of equal importance as the ascendant. Now, conceptually or philosophically, that's a question, okay? Because that's now separate from equal houses. It's saying the ascendant is only important as a route for time. And that time connection to the horizon, now it is giving meaning to the diurnal arc subsequent to it. Okay. And why some people like Placidus is because it takes the sun the same amount of time to go from one house cusp to the next house cusp. It's convenient, I suppose, but I mean, what does that mean? So what? How are you using that? Okay, if for some reason you're using that in a particular way, like in Vedic astrology, we use that fact in a particular way, then sure, this house system will have meaning for you for that reason. Okay, but you need to sit and think about which house system you're comfortable with using and what is it trying to do conceptually, okay, and what those degrees in each sign as house cusps mean, okay, and whether you're okay with that or not. All right. Okay. So the Koch house system, is also separate in time. But it's not using the ascendant, it's using the midheaven degree. Okay, it's using the midheaven degree. So now you're placing the time journey of the midheaven is important in this system. It's not about you in that sign. It's about what you need to do in that sign. Okay, the goals, the manifestation of your achievement in that sign. Okay, where do you see that happening? Or where is that happening? You now have to meet it. Okay, it's not saying where you are in the sign, your journey towards it in the sign. It's not saying that. It's saying this is where that goal has evolved to. That's where it is sitting in that degree, in that sign. How are you going towards it? That's the question you have to think about, right? So this is it's kind of like Regiomontanus when you're talking about manifestation here, culmination, okay, because the midheaven is defined as the culmination of the sun. The highest altitude of the sun in the sky is the midheaven, okay? So using that concept, so it's almost like a very solar degree in that sign. It's saturated with that meaning of, that you're up on the mountaintop and you've got there, you reached that. Okay, that is the mountain that is shown to you as this cusp in the Koch system, and you now have to get there. Okay, you are not there yet because it's using the midheaven journey, time journey. Okay. Right. Any questions on those? How they constructed?
The Placidus system seems very calculation heavy.
It is very calculation heavy.
Did he base it in, when you say each degree of the sign, I assume that it's degrees of the sign in 1 degree increments?
I'm
to keep it
assuming
very
so.
simple, I suppose.
Yeah. But I mean, the software will do for every, minute.
Okay. Yeah.
Right.
For every infinitesimal. Okay.
Right. Okay. So Placidus is very thorough, but thorough in doing what? Okay. And that's the question we have to ask. Right. So which emphasis, when you're looking at house systems, think about, well, which degree in the sign do I want to look more into as the defining mountaintop in the sign, as the area of life? The whole sign is going to give you the area of life, right? It's the 10th sign from the ascendant. It's about career, manifestation, external, all that. Okay. Public life. The different degree, house cusps are going to tell you in that sign these different nuances. So make a decision about that, and then you do your investigation accordingly. Okay, so I use house systems depending on what I want to look at, because I don't look at it as a house system, I look at it as an emphasis in a sign system. Okay, that's just my view, right? The houses are always, the whole sign is the base foundation, and that's why people tend to like it. Placidus is the most used one. Yeah, so Coroners made an important point there that in Placidus, the diurnal arc of each degree is given equal importance as the ascendant. So what does that mean, right? And also, the sun moves through each house from house cusp for house cusp in the same amount of time. So it's an equal journey of the sun in each, 30 each house increment. It's the same equal emphasis as the ascendant to each degree. Okay. So I don't know. What that means, right? Because you're saying that another degree is rising, is defining that house cusp, whereas say like Alcabitius is saying the ascendant rising is defining that house cusp. So it's a different, if you want to be, I suppose, very strong Venus types will probably say something like, oh, Placidus, it's equal, it's harmonious, everyone's got a fair share, that kind of thing. Maybe, I don't know, it's something to think about, and I'd love to have discussions about these things with people, because it's something that we should be discussing and thinking about, and I hope that people continue discussions. We're coming to whole sign, Corinna, we're coming to all of that just now, right? So the house system history timeline, okay? So there's a debate about whole signs, the beginning of time. Obviously, the zodiac is there, okay? But actually, when you read the text, people tend to be referring to an equal house system. It's a question of, is it easier in a day, ancient times, when paper was very expensive, getting a scribe to write for you was expensive? Are they really going to give charts, with degrees on them and house? Really, I've got to think about that as well. The practical aspect of writing in those times, and doing whole signs is just very easy to illustrate a point and move on to the next thing as well, and it won't be wrong because it's whole signs, right? The archetype of the zodiac is always going to be true. You're just not getting the added details. Okay, so there's something to bear in mind, and there's people go on debating on which one came first and which one, but is it really important which one came first? The first car wasn't the best car we have. We've improved upon it, we've thought about it, we've engineered things since then. So what's important, I think, is to know, instead of which one came first, but to understand what each one is saying. Why is each one the way it is? All right. And, the creators of these house systems are, it's very interesting to read about their lives, because you get a sort of their worldview basically has shaped their construction of the house system. Okay, and so you have all them up here, and the most recent one that we talked about is Walter Koch, and evolutionary astrologers use this a lot, and you can understand why, because the ascension of the midheaven is about evolution in a certain sense, right? You can look at it in that way. So it's where you're going, it's how you're evolving. Okay, so the Koch house system is also used by the Hubert school and these kind of schools. But so these are very interesting points for you to go and look at and research into, as here on the table. Johannes Müller called himself king on the mountain. Okay, at that time, intellectualism, scientism, enlightenment. It was all about scientific inquiry and all that jazz. Okay. That's all I want to talk about on the history side, because it's all available on Google. You can go and look. But these are the people. These are the rough time frames we have at the moment. to go look at and investigate. Right. And you find that up to the Renaissance period, most people were using Alcabitius in the text. The Persian medieval authors, they were using Alcabitius. Equal houses sometimes, After that, you had Regiomontanus being used a lot, so in the time of Lilly, which was in the 17th century, okay. Placidus tables became available only later, okay. So, just because Lilly used it doesn't mean it's the only one to use for her. Maybe if he had the tables that were available for Placidus, he would have used that. Okay, we just don't know, So in choosing a house system, just keep all the availability, accessibility, ease of use, ease of teaching. When you're reading text, just keep all these things in mind. Okay. Right, so let's do some examples. What's the time? Cool. I have to go a bit quickly. So whole signs is not technically a house system, but it's speaking to a paradigm that is always true. Okay, division of the sun's one unified consciousness into 12. Okay, and the number 12 is very important because it's Jupiter's cycle around the sun. It's also how many sets of 2.5 fit into one sign. Okay. How many sets of 12 fit into a sign is 2.5, right? Which is 5 divided by 2. So you have 5 visible planets and the 2 luminaries. Okay, so from a numerical point of view, it's very deep signification. The paradigm of the whole signs, therefore, doesn't take into account the division of space and time directly, okay, as rising setting, right? It is a division of time in the year, okay? So it's a different sort of paradigm we're talking about here. It is showing you the manifestation that you would be. It would be true if you were the only person on Earth. Because the house systems, in a way, are showing the soul coming down into the earthly manifestation as being conditioned by time and space. You have to negotiate what you want with the rest of the planet and everybody else's rules and things out there. Okay, environmental factors are taken into account. Prenatal, postnatal factors are taken into account. Where you are on the surface of the earth can influence things. Okay, you might have a sun in the 10th house, but it manifests very differently if you were in the middle of the Congo or you were in the middle of the UK. You might be a homosexual, and in those two places, are you able to do your sun thing? How are you going to do your sun in the 10th house? Okay, these factors, I feel, are representations of the division and the conditioning of space and time, which is being represented by a quote-unquote house system. But whole signs is going to be just straightforward. This is the core intent, the core impulse, the background theme that is always there in the background. So, people will feel that whole signs is more true. People say, but whole signs works for me better, or it's more true for me. Of course it's going to be more true for you because it is more true for everybody. Okay? So, but in practicing, you'll see here that, the cusps are very relevant, okay? Because I'll show you by examples, but this is my view about it at the moment. It may change in a year's time or something, but the whole science is going to give you the baseline, which is always going to be true. But it's not the complete picture. It's a necessary condition, but it's not a sufficient condition for delineation. Correct. That's right, Karina. We come from whole signs as a wish or impulse, and then we have to deal with all the other conditioning and everybody else, and then it manifests somewhere else as something different. Okay, so we all have experienced that. We want something to happen a certain way, but it happens somewhere else. Okay, so we do all our internal planning based on whole signs because it's the most closest to our internal psyche, right, in view of the world. But how it actually manifests is very different sometimes. Okay. Cameron said we come from whole signs moving towards others, is the genetic blueprint, and then the other house signs are the expression of this depending. Correct, that's right, correct, that's what I'm trying to say. The genetic impulse, the core impulse, the inner psyche impulse is the whole signs, and then negotiating that in the environment and the other worlds of people out there in space and time, the house system tells you, well, that is where it's manifesting. This is what you got to do to make it work better. Okay. So we're going to examples. Okay, so let's do that right now. So this is an example, Muhammad Ali. It's a medical example. I thought I'll do the most hairy example first. Okay, and I'm going to do a little bit of medical astrology here, looking at midpoints. Now, please note I've cast this in equal houses because I want to see the mind-body connection in every sign. Okay. If I was looking at, the relapse of cancer possible and things like that, maybe I'll do Regiomontanus, because then my archetype as well. There's an illness that this person is fighting, so it's something external, right? But we all know illness is not just something external. There's always something internal going on, and a mind-body connection is going to show you that. Okay, and so equal houses, in my view, is what is showing the mind-body connection every sign. So there's some points I want to just mention, right? So Mars-Jupiter as a midpoint is in 22 degrees Taurus. This conjunct his Saturn. Okay, this is a midpoint of immunity, and being placed with Saturn in Taurus, well, that's a bit vulnerable. Okay, high endurance, okay, but also quite vulnerable. Shouldn't take it too much, shouldn't really push the body. Okay, also in an earth sign. The Mars-Neptune midpoint is 16 degrees of Cancer. Okay, that is in the 12th sign, interestingly. Okay, and that the Mars-Neptune signature is a vulnerability point. Okay, is everybody on here? Some people have dropped out, I see. Just ping me.
I'm here.
Please. Okay, cool. So I want to check. The Mars-Saturn midpoint is a morbidity midpoint, and that is at 12 degrees of Taurus. Again, come to Taurus, and that's his midheaven. Now, isn't that interesting? Okay, his public activity in a Taurus physical manner is affecting or degrading the body, and that is true. He developed Parkinson's. All the boxing and his nervous system also affected. Okay, and Saturn Neptune midpoint is about disintegration, and again we're coming to the 12th sign. So just what does this tell you? That Taurus, Cancer, and the moon, because the moon rules both signs, are very important illness indicators for this person. So now let's, physical and holistic, right? This is how I do medical astrology. It's not just the physical. I can do that. So Taurus is what? What parts of the body? The neck, the throat, okay? Cancer, the lungs, breathing, okay? Heart as well, but the ruler is an air sign, so I'm going to go with the lungs. So you can think about that. But also, Taurus is about financial management, the money that you're keeping and holding. And Taurus, as an archetype, is about family and home. So I expect these two areas of life to be the most vulnerable for him. If he's stressed out in these two areas of life, well, guess what? His chances of becoming sick are more likely. And that is true for him if you read his biographies. Okay. His family was very resentful that he didn't share any money with them and things like that. Okay. And you see the moon sitting in the 7th sign. So it's about a relationship, but it is in the 6th house. So it's a working relationship. It's a relationship that's like a burden that he feels obligated to, like it's just a contractual situation. Okay. So that is how you combine the two. And it's true. I mean, his wife was the one that managed all the money and took money, and the family didn't like that. And it really, stressed him out that he wasn't okay with that, even though he had the success and all of that. Okay. So it's important to understand, you combine these effects together, right? And if you use an equal house system, well, what planets are around equal house degrees? 19 degrees of any sign? Well, okay, Saturn's pretty close, and Venus is right there. So this Saturn-Venus square is very important from a mind-body connection point of view. again, we're emphasizing that, and they're in each other's signs. So it's a very strong connection, that partner and public and all of that jazz. Okay. And he had a neck operation in 2013. You can see it activates the vulnerability point of Saturn at the equal house, near the equal house degree of that sign. And that is when all these illnesses began. That was the opening of the vulnerability point. His one immunity degree was compromised. Okay. So, and from that, everything else kind of escalated the subsequent 4 years, and then he died. It did go into the moon in the 6th house, okay, being an Aquarius. So he had Alzheimer's at the end, and that was quite sad, because Aquarius is about fixed air, fixed in the mind, okay? So you can say that, yes, this perhaps escalated because of the relationship stress on his mind. You could say that. I don't know, he's not my client. He might be able to refute what I'm saying, but that's, so if someone proactively, notices, see, well, you know what, these areas of your life, just, manage your stress, do what you can. You're not totally, can't take full responsibility for it, but it's going to want to, because the moon is in the 6th house. And the moon being the 7th sign, he wanted a partner who would be able to help him with that, but he didn't really get that, okay? So I like this way you combine the house systems and read the chart accordingly. Yes, that's true. These midpoints are, Mars-Jupiter midpoint these are my interpretations: immunity, vulnerability, mobility, and disintegration. They're very important in medical astrology from my point of view. Okay. And see how quickly we've just done a medical astrology reading. Okay. So then you go into other things, 6th house, 8th house, blah, blah, okay? Part of sickness, part of death, etc., right? All those things. But my point is, from a holistic point of view, we are also looking at those areas of life, because that's what the houses are, right? And, okay. Mundane chart example, the year of Brexit. This is the Aries ingress at the location of London, okay, for 2016. You can see that Mars is on the midheaven. Mars is the midheaven. All of this is very close to the equal house, the degree here. Okay, 7 degrees in the midheaven, 8 degrees, 56, and Mars is there. Mars shows what? Separations, doesn't it? Right. Now that is showing the action. Is a financial action, because it's the 11th sign. It's to do with our community, our group that we used to belong to. Sagittarius, the natural 9th sign of the zodiac, our foreign group that we are part of, the EU, right? Okay, body of organization that we are part of as friends or whatever. It's an organization, right? It's a foreign country's organization. But we are doing what action? The action of the year is here. The midheaven is showing the action point, okay? Where the sun is having the maximum altitude. And the sun, midheaven, is important in mundane astrology chart, because we're talking about countries and leaders. What are the leaders doing? Their action is about this topic. That's what the midheaven is showing. Mars, they're showing, well, it's likely a separation. So I was pretty sure that a separation would be happening. Okay. Now, you could also say, well, hold signs, hang on a moment. The 10th, from the house system, the 9th house is Scorpio, and the ruler of that is Mars. So it's also showing separation there, okay, with the 9th house thing. So you see the 9th sign is there, the 9th house is here. It's all kind of repeating significations everywhere, which gives you more certainty in prediction or delineation. You also have the 10th sign ruler sitting on the midheaven. So it's maybe also a new kind of leader rising up, because midheaven is about rising up. Okay, and Theresa May has very strong Scorpio signatures anyway. She's short also in stature. That's a Mars thing as well. Okay, so you can think about all of that. And, look at the moon, because moon is the people. Wasn't that where we've been having all these eclipses since then? So, the saga still continues and is not resolved. And, fine. These eclipses must play out. And then Brexit will be finally finalized. contextualized, all right? So you're doing prediction just from one chart. Do we do that? No, but it's strong testimony that then contextualizes everything else you do. Okay. This is the chart that I'm using for Russia. It is the formal announcement of the dissolution of the USSR and the take-up of Russia as an independent state. Okay. So here you can see that, let's look at the midheaven. I'm using Placidus here. Equal opportunity, maybe, communist. Okay, let's see what happens, right? So you can see the midheaven is 17 degrees of Capricorn. Now that's interesting because Pluto has been transiting 17 degrees Capricorn following the US elections, and Russia is now a prominent thing, coming together. Now, you would think, well, that means the US elections were happening while Pluto was going through all, South Node, Moon, Uranus, Neptune in Russia's Capricorn sign. Now that's the natural 10th sign of the zodiac. Okay, it is the 9th sign of the chart, which shows foreign relations, trade, import, these kind of things. Capricorn means very harsh terms and conditions. Okay, and Russia is not known for its. It's known for its autocratic sort of use of resources as part of its foreign policy. So the 9th sign, 10th house signification is very nicely captured there. There's no contradiction. It makes sense, right? And Russia's coming up to its Saturn return in a couple of years' time. So we're going to see that it really comes into its own, right? Saturn rules the 9th and the 10th signs in this chart. And it's a day chart. Russia's not going anywhere anytime soon. So you can see, the 8th house sun suits Russia, doesn't it? But okay, all right. And their view of foreign nations is Scorpionic, and Pluto's there, fine. Okay. And diplomacy is not really the strong point with Venus in the 6th, all right, and in detriment besides. So are you getting a sense of how you're using both the systems? It's actually just, it makes things very easy, actually, Why struggle and try to get one house system? Just, see what all of them are saying. Maybe that's my Mercury in Pisces. Now I look at chart of Princess Diana, the year she died. I'm using the Koch house system here because I want to see externally what is going on with her in each sign. Yes, both means the whole science and whatever house system you wish to use or you're choosing to use. Okay, so in this chart you can see this is the solar return for the year that she died. Okay, what's near a equal house cusp? Venus is there, okay, on the equal house cusp. And maybe you can say Mars and Uranus, Pluto for sure. Okay. Now, she is Sagittarius rising natally, okay, and the Venus has a very strong connection there. So the ruler of the chart has a Venus-Pluto, connection very strong. Right, and Scorpio is her 12th. But what does Venus, the chart ruler, rule? The 1st and the 8th house, or should I say the 1st and the 8th sign? That is the basic blueprint, okay, and you see in her natal chart, the sign of Leo is in her 8th house. So the 8th house signification is coming through here, right? But relationship was also a focus for her in that year. That is true. The ruler of the 7th is in the 1st. But it's in detriment. It didn't really work out. There was a lot of bad press about it, okay, as well. If I use, and you see here the Venus also rules the 9th and the 8th, which is true externally, publicly, that's kind of what she was doing and aiming for. It was a taboo relationship with the person in a foreign land. If I'm using Regiomontanus, let's see, well, okay, the 8th house, the 9th house cusp is actually in the 8th sign. You see, you come to the same thing, but Regiomontanus is saying really external manifestation. All right? And that is true. She died in a foreign land. So that's something that, so that's how you look at it, I would say. I mean, Regiomontanus is basically showing you externally, really. Cool, Leonie's back. That's fine. We all will get the recording. But, okay, yeah, so you see Leo is, see her Venus, and so the return is on the part of fortune in the 8th house. 3 degrees Leo, 3 degrees Leo, right? And it's the 8th house in the natal chart, but it's the 9th sign. So again, you're seeing dying in a foreign land coming through together, okay? And the ruler of that Leo is in the 7th house, okay? So it is showing that as well, relationship context. So a lot of repeating factors and testimonies here. Yeah, you can add the other stuff, an erratic degree moon and, ruling the 10th, and, I mean, she did have, it was a loss of reputation as far as the press was concerned. Okay, so this is your natal chart. Let's see what the time is. Okay, cool. For one of my clients from Italy. And you can see that, all right, now, only thing I want you to note here, what's important here. Right, 26 degrees of Scorpio rising. So 26 degrees of Taurus in the descendant, Algol as a fixed star is there, okay? That's important to note. What else is at 26 degrees of a sign? Well, Jupiter's kind of there. The North Node, Jupiter is kind of around there. Mercury retrograde in Leo is around there. So I'm getting from a body-mind connection, there's a Leo Mercury and a nodal axis. And that's true, he's very sort of self-focused kind of individual, born at a full moon time anyway. Okay, so life seesaws between home and family all the time. And that's true, right? Now, this Mars is in the 7th sign. So that's problems in relationship, right? It is the 6th sign ruler in the 7th sign. It is the first sign ruler in the 7th sign, right? It is cadent in the 6th house. So his influence on partners is low. Okay. Now Mars rules the 5th house. There's also issues about, conjugal matters in relationship, which also played out in his relationship. So all of whichever way you want to look at that Mars, it happened for him. That's what I'm saying. Okay. Now he moved to Milan and his father died. Now, why would that happen? What changed in the chart? The midheaven degree and the ascendant degree changed. Well, now he moved to Milan, which is in the same country, by the way. Okay. The Pluto came closer to the midheaven. Okay, sure, fine. The previous ninth house, 10th sign situation became more obvious. Okay, which would actually oppose the father and the moon very strongly. Okay, 4th house, 10th house axis. But also, if you notice, the Mars comes to above the horizon. Now that's a problem for relationship. And from this location in Milan, he tried having relations with people in all sorts of places that fell along his Mars-Pluto lines, actually. So, we go looking for the people that unfold the karma that we are carrying, even across space. And, so it was funny because they'd meet in France, but she was born in one of the countries near Finland, which is where his Mars line went through anyway, So, but also notice that the 9th house cusp changes. The sun is losing a house rulership because Leo becomes intercepted. So the 9th house ruler now is no longer the sun on this side of the full moon Pluto axis, but it goes to the moon. The emphasis becomes now on the father. And it is the 6th sign, the 6th house from the 4th, which is showing the father's illness now escalating. All right. And also the father's sorry. Yeah, and also you can see that the eighth sign from, you know, for the father is the eighth house from the fourth is this 11th house, which is the Libra. Now notice that when he goes to Milan, what was I going to say here? There's something about the Venus. Yeah. The equal house cusp comes closer to the Venus. So it moves the whole chart mind-body connection focus from the late degrees of every sign to the middle degrees of every sign. So now the planets that are at the middle degrees of every sign get more influence and power in terms of affecting body and mind. And his 12th sign ruler, 11th house ruler, you know, which is the 8th from the father, showing the father's death, with Uranus. I mean, his father fell down at work, and that's how his father died. You know, so sixth sign from Pisces, yes, father's work. Sixth house from Pisces, yes, father's work, father's illness, all very, you know, coming into emphasis here. So you can see that if you don't use the house cusps, you cannot do astrolocality for people. You will just lose a lot of information and emphasis, okay? So whole science is fine for understanding the base blueprint, but you have to build on that if you want to be more accurate or correct, okay? And I think the last example I have here is a dream. And this is the dream an astrologer in New York had about me. So naturally, I was interested to find out more about it. So we had a long discussion about it, actually, and it was quite interesting. You know, but dream interpretations are very interesting, actually. The Hellenistic astrologers, yes, they're primarily using whole signs. And like I said, there may be various reasons for that, which may not always be because it's the best one. It may also be out of expedience as well at that time in history. But you find like Vettius Valens and those kind of people who are Hellenistic astrologers, and he was a well more traveled than others. I mean, Ptolemy was not an astrologer, so let's like forget about what he said about our systems, you know. But Vettius Valens was an actual astrologer who traveled extensively in the Mediterranean, collecting techniques, and in some of those techniques, he's using equal houses. Counting from 90th degree from the ascendant is an important point. Example, you know, these kind of things, you read those in the passages. That can only be relevant if you're talking about equal houses. Okay. So, I mean, that is a long-standing debate with astrologers, but in my mind, it's not a debate, and we're just wasting our time. You need to understand what the house systems are doing and know how to use them. And that's all, right? So, yeah, the dream example. Okay, so here we go. So she was kind of walking, like sleepwalking in the dream, and it was this dirty place, like a village, like a rural village somewhere, and maybe in India, we don't know. But she walked across the road to my house, apparently. It was like a hut, or it wasn't a house, it was like a cowshed, she said. And I was living on the top of the cowshed, on the loft of the cowshed. So I'm assuming it was like a big cowshed, okay? You know, so my family must have been wealthy because we were, you know, had this barn thing to like host all of these cows or something, you know, and cows was a indicator of wealth in those days, in the Taurus age or whatever. So, and then she came up and she was naked. She was walking naked, and she was sleepwalking up the ladder into the loft. And she, instead of me there, it was my friend who was there, one of the, you know, stable boys. And I came in later. It was all very kind of awkward, you know, like what the hell's going on here, you know. So we pulled up a chart to kind of figure out what's going on. And it is interesting, you know, the ruler of the ascent, you know, Capricorn is showing a dirty place. Okay. Sorry for all the Capricorn people out there, but in terms of places, environments, Capricorn is not a clean place. You know, Cancer is the clean place, okay, where the waters are constantly flushing and rejuvenating. Capricorn is the opposite of that, okay. Things are, you know, decaying, or it's dirty, you know, that kind of thing. But so that follows from the dream environment, okay? And Saturn was in the 12th house in Sagittarius, which is the hips, right? The legs, and she was sleepwalking. The 12th house also shows sleeping. So that was very, I mean, this chart is radical. It's describing the situation, right? But the interesting thing was the cowshed was the location. That was the more further detailed situation. I mean, the Scorpio moon on the 10th is, showing, nakedness and all that, right? But you see, if you take the 4th sign, you do not get a cowshed as an environment. What is Aries? But if you take the 4th house, you do. It was a cowshed in the 4th house is Taurus here. So what I'm saying with this example, even though it was a dream, and we describe an internal situation, even then the whole science is not showing the actual what was happening in the dream. So this made me question, okay, well, maybe if I want to do an interpretation of the dream in as terms of my inner psyche, then, okay, 4th sign becomes relevant, right? But if I want to describe the dream, then the houses are more important, surely, as borne out by this example. So it depends on how you want to read the chart, which way you go, okay? So I want to use a dream example specifically to show that even if you're looking at something that is happening inside you, you still have to make the externalization is the house, and the internal situation is the sign, okay? So the whole sign 4th was true, perhaps. It was my shed, maybe. Ownership is shown, okay? In the neighborhood village, 3rd sign, Mars, okay? Water, Pisces. Yeah, it was kind of rainy and muddy and all those things. But it was also actually a cowshed. So it's something to think about. I find it very interesting to investigate what these houses and all these things are doing with each other. Okay, because it can change how you interpret something. Now, if I just said 4th sign was the house and I explained the ownership way, yeah, sure, that's a very personal view on the cowshed, right? How I had ownership of it. Okay, so it is kind of like a whole science approach to what was happening, but it's not describing the actual external thing, right? So I am using Porphyry here because it is a subjective experience, and I want to get some emphasis on that subjective experience in each sign, but the angles are not going to change necessarily, okay? So just take that point. How did I choose it? It's the time when she woke up. I always look at, when I'm looking at dream charts, the time when someone wakes up and realizes they were dreaming. That is the time I want. Because that is the connection of the internal reality with the waking consciousness. The dream consciousness and the waking consciousness are merged at that moment in time. Okay, so that's what I want to look at. And other ways to interpret a chart. Yes, you can do and then we did the whole psychological interpretation, and we spoke about, the message of the dream, the intent of the dream, the future of the dream, all these kind of things we talked about. But, those are, I'm not teaching dream interpretation here, but that's kind of where we're going, right? So I hope that and there's references, okay? These references are very good. Please look at them. If you want to go into primary directions and understand it, this is the book to have. Okay, I worked through it in a week. It was good to do. Deborah Holding's book is also excellent in terms of, she goes into more detail about the evolution of houses and the meanings and different, but she doesn't give you the construction and the archetypes behind it. Okay, she talks from a primary emotion point of view, what's kind of going on. And like I said, the meaning of the houses, systems, and working with whole science, that's my own invention. So that's what I wanted to share with you. And now you have the means and the tools and the reasoning behind everything, and go out and explore and have intelligent discussions out there. Okay, none of this my teacher told me this kind of thing, or I read this in the book, or Ptolemy did this. Just investigate. Now that you know how they're constructed, investigate and please find out for yourself. All right? And thank you for attending. Everyone will be receiving the recording tonight. Any questions?
Oh.
Yes, just looking at some questions here. Yeah, Karina, that's what we said. The chart ruled in the 12th because she was sleepwalking. It was Sagittarius, the 12th sign, right? So sleepwalking, Sagittarius in the 12th. The chart, because it's a dream, the chart ruler doesn't have to be in the 12th house. No, that's not the reason for it being radical. But the chart ruler should describe the person in the dream. And that's what the chart was doing. Any other questions? Okay. Great. Okay. So thank you everyone for attending. I hope this was useful, and I want to see you guys using it out there on Facebook. Okay. So have a good evening. Bye-bye.